Welcome back to another episode of the Worthy for 30 podcast. I am here in sunny, beautiful postcard weather, Los Angeles, with my friend, guest, and thank you so much for her family opening up her house doors for me to stay while I'm here in LA. I am your host, Eric Tash, and with us is Ryan Berman, whose name has come up a couple of times in the past. And now, the founder of Courageous, a consultancy working with Fortune 500 and 1,000 brands to help work with them to uncover clarity and that courageous quotient in their work and their leadership ability. Ryan, welcome to the show.
I was terrified of that intro. You're like, I've come up a couple times in this show. Like, what exact adjective was used before Ryan Berman? Was it like that jerk Ryan Berman or that asshole Ryan Berman? Am I allowed to use profanity this soon into the show? I mean, let's go, right? Straight through the eyes, right? Let's go. Let's go.
Part of the same speaker series or Impact 11.
Yeah, speaking community.
In the speaking community, and they're going to see each other in Detroit in September, which is pretty amazing. And Ryan, just to give you some background, so I had Alyssa on the show, I think at the beginning of this year or the end of 2024, and she's been a guest co-host on another episode and this conversation, because Alyssa started WeGotThis.org, as she mentioned, is that first nonprofit gift registry for cancer patients. And I thought it would be great to have you on the show as well, talking about courageous and clarity. And love for you to just, because it's funny, I was on LinkedIn today and I saw your post about Todd Kaplan, I think who's now at Frito-Lay, talking
That's
about
close. Craft Times. Craft Times.
okay, craft time.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Talking about best practices, like what are best practices? What is the playbook of today? Is the playbook of yesterday still in play today? So love for you to provide some background on the work that you and your and Courageous are doing.
First of all, Alyssa, I love We Got This. I mean, you can feel it. I mean, I'm sure we all have our negative blessings in life, right? And that's a whole nother podcast in
Oh,
itself,
I like the way you say that. I haven't heard someone
right?
say blessings yet.
Yeah, I've had my negative blessings that sort of catapulted me into this chapter of my life, and it's amazing how sometimes I'm like, wow, how is it that one of the worst days of my life is now one of the best days of my life? And if it wasn't, for me, that was getting let go from a company in New York, and like I can still see me like angry and sad and sheepish and embarrassed as I'm like leaving the building. And now, it's a long time ago, but like now it's like, wow, if that never happened, I don't move to California. I don't become an entrepreneur. I know me. I just don't. And I never would have fumbled into the word courage. And, a lot of my early choices, I would never have had the awareness to realize, oh my gosh, that was courageous of me to the age of 7 to get on an airplane and go to summer camp 2 states away for a month. And that was courageous of me to move to New York City with pretty much at 22 with no job. I had an internship and like I remember thinking I'm gonna live at this company. Like I am not leaving till I get a job. But that wasn't the word I would have used back then. I probably would have used like desperation meets grit, right? But now it's been what's courageous to me to start my own business, and now this is the third or fourth, I guess it's the fourth business I've been able to start. But it's the first time I've got the name right. It's the first time that I really feel like what I love most about the name is it tells the universe who we're not for as much as who we are for. And I'm just trying not to waste anybody's time. Like if someone doesn't think they're ready to go for it, they don't, they're just like, hey, we're just trying to iterate, and there's a place for that too. But like with my short time on this planet, if someone is stuck or scared or they're worried about status quo with their team or their organization or the ideas and where it needs to be, I mean, the amount of times this week I've said, where do you need courage the most? Is it a courageous conversation? Is it a courageous decision? Is it courageous leadership? Is it a courageous idea? Is it courageous transformation? Go to all of the above. That's that kind of been the last, now we'll say 8 years, has been exploring. Wow, I never realized how wide the arena really is, and we've found ourselves playing. Sometimes it's like a keynote, sometimes it's a workshop, sometimes we're on the hip of a client, and it's transformation. We're like with their team over a course of a year or two, and we're their outside perspective, their inspiration, and also their accountability partner, helping them do what we said we were going to do. So it's been a really, really fun, messy experiment, and I'm not pretending to have it figured out, but like our role in all of this.
Gotcha. No, that's a great background. And in terms of, the organizations, the brands, the executives that you work with, is it usually like, insanity? We're doing the same thing over and over again, and we need to do something different. And I need to talk to Ryan. Like, how do they come across courageous? Like, I'd love to understand. We'd love to understand like how that
Yeah.
comes.
Yeah, it's kind of the entry point is all over the board right now, because sometimes someone will hear me keynote and they're like, "Hey, do you do X?" And you're like, "We do that, yes." Or sometimes it's, I've been doing this for 3 decades now, so you've met a lot of people along the way. I used to have hair. There used to be a time I had hair when I was doing this. Now, no, there's no hair, but you just meet enough people and you just try to help them solve their pain. There's pain somewhere, right? Like they're not connecting with the team the way they want. The amount of times I've heard the leaders say, "We know the plan, the team doesn't get the plan." And the team's like, "No, we get the plan. We're not inspired by the plan." And that's really hard. That's a really hard conversation to navigate in both directions, where you're hired almost like a United Nations translator, saying, leadership, like if you really want a retention strategy, like we're not ready to talk about how you show up in the world. Like let's just talk about galvanizing the people that are giving their 40 to 80 hours a week to be here and work for you. Are you making it an enjoyable arena for them? Is there clarity? Like, are we aligned on we call it a shared quest conversation, but like, what is the shared quest that we're all going on? It's not just about making money. This next generation is not interested in just going to work and making someone else money. There has to be a larger purpose. That's hard. That's hard for leaders to swallow. It's like, but sometimes that's the story. And then on the other side, yeah, I joke like the next generation, they want to have their cake, they want to eat it too, they want the cake to be gluten free, they want everything, right? And that's they're allowed to ask for everything, but also understanding the pain of the leader, understanding sometimes it's not the leader, it's like it's the C suite. Sometimes it's the board that's too far away from reality, but they're the ones calling the shot, and that poor leader is trying to hold the board back, the weight of their shoulders, right? And they're just trying to get the most out of the team. So there's a lot of empathy still to the work we do. I think we're just calling ourselves courageous. It's not like rock, paper, scissors, rock every single time out. We're like trying to be very delicate about the conversation that
Gotcha. Because as you're talking about like some of like the internal strife, between leadership and employees and how it is affecting one versus the other, and then you have different generations working together, and is one motivated by X, the other one's motivated by Y. What also comes to mind, what conjures up, is like I remember Danny Meyer of Union Square Hospitality, whose whole concept is if you take care of your employees are going to take care of your customers. So are you starting to see that correlation? Like if the internal strife is resolved, then outwardly that brand is doing better. Are you seeing that correlation?
I don't know if I can confidently give you the data
Sure.
that backs that correlation, but the hypothesis is, if you want to know the sob story is, you like, I went to New York City, I learned from the crazy bad men on how to tell a succinct story, and that's hard to do. Like in this media obese world that we're living in, having an idea stand out when you're not there to defend it, when it's in with the sea of everything else on Twitter or wherever it's going to live, and you're not there to point to your idea. You're like, look at this one. Says nobody. Nobody can do that. And the world doesn't care if you've worked on an idea for 100 hours or 3. They just see the final product. So I was very lucky to learn from some of the very best in that world. And then I moved west, started my first agency, 4 people out of a house, did the business bingo game, which I didn't know how to play, meaning I ended up buying out a partner. I ended up buying a company, I ended up merging a business. Shit, I had to learn. Like, I didn't go to business school. I went to television and radio school. So, like, you're learning as you go along. We finally get to about 90 people. And there's a moment in 2015 where I remember, yeah, I felt like it was the first time where that whole I'm not in the business, I'm on the business, right? Like I'm not in the day, right? That line. And so the call I get is a biz dev call. And it was a fear-based marketer, and I don't blame the marketer. Like they needed to do their job. Like they're like, hey, I have this project. Can you do this for this price? And we do this for this price. All right, well, what is this? Well, we're sliced bread. Okay, we're sliced bread because of yada yada yada. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Why this price? Well, that's my budget. Okay. I haven't hung up yet. Can I come interview the culture? And it's like, what? What? No, like, what do you mean? Like, can you help me tell the world we're this?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I could do that, but like, is it true to the culture? Like, is it truly who you guys are? And like that poor human's like, dude, I need a win. Like, I need a win with my boss. They've
Right.
tasked me with this project. Right. This is the conversation, the unspoken conversation underneath the actual conversation we're having. And I remembered hanging up the phone and realizing that I felt like for me, I could not make the impact at the level I wanted to. And I just spent like 20 years grinding away to get to a place in an agency where it was finally my turn to like make an impact. I'm like, shoot, I'm too far away from the decision maker. And at that moment, I was already writing my book, Return on Courage, and like realized I basically need to eject myself out of this life and find a way to get closer to leaders. The aha was I thought going in, courageous ideas are the only ones that matter, but really, courageous ideas die without courageous leaders. And now this is how this story actually comes full circle.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is if I can help leaders get clear on the story, and it's one story, we're almost like a chiropractor, right? Like the business is out of alignment with what they're saying to the outside world. And marketers are doing the best they can to like they're like we know the story, let's tell the world the story, and they've got to move so fast that they're not pressure checking with the culture, and we're like no, you need to galvanize the culture. We need to make sure this is their story, that they co-create this story, and if we can co-create the story, it's one line from the leader's lips through a galvanized team, then all the way out to the world. So that's like the mission that we've been on is I feel like we used to be at the end of the conveyor belt on just helping marketing. And now we're trying to go behind the curtain, which is where the conveyor belt starts, and help the leader get clear and go from there.
Gotcha. No, that is amazing. And are you starting to see, like, I know, like going back to my days working at Prestige Brands, we would have annual operating plans where you'd have your 4 objectives and then your 3 strategies, and here's some of the tactics that ladder up to the strategies. Are you starting to see, or are your clients coming back to you and saying, hey, Ryan, we're infusing some of the courageous work into our annual operating plans to make sure it's not
Yeah.
just falling to the wayside?
There's certain clients, and again, it's taken us pretty much 8 years to finally have the right relationship where that's happening. And there's one client in particular where our retainer, our statement of work this year has nothing to do with what's shared with the outside world. It's all about like indoctrinating, getting the team ready to deliver on the promise of the
Mhm.
business, right? Which is
Yeah.
awesome because it's like once they buy in and they're galvanized and they're in, then we're going to take that story to the outside world, right? And it's like
Dealing
people,
with yeah, sorry. I'd imagine you're dealing with initially a lot of egos too. Of people being like, well, no, internally we're fine. We just want help with this. So finding the right client for you must be, a huge part of the process.
yeah, my favorite word, you would think it would be courage, right? Like that should be it, right? Like if we're playing password, like you got me. But my favorite word is actually willing, right? There's a willingness. Like, are you willing? I love the double entendre. Like, are you open minded enough to hear the perspective, not just of me, of your team? Are you listening? Right. Like, and I think to your point about egos, we've seen a lot of leaders who say, we know the plan. We know the plan. They don't. It's like, they, no, like that's the problem. There's no we, they, like, it should just be us. It should just be like, let's understand that. Where did that come from? So is there a willingness to be flexible, to be open minded, to hear from your team? And sometimes our job is to just create the conditions for that conversation to happen in both sides. And then once you agree on something, do you have the will to see it through? Like, do you have the metal? Because shit's gonna happen, right? Like, right, a board's gonna say something, or a new tariff is gonna suddenly show up out of nowhere, right? Like, there's going to be shit that shows up, and you have to, as a leader, have to stay firm and be like, no, we said this is what we're gonna do, right? This is the plan. It's not gonna be perfect, but let's go. Let's execute it. So that's, I never saw myself in the leadership arena. I never saw myself going there. To be honest, I had an early mentor that said to me, I'll do this in the classic New York way. This is Ron Berger, my Ron Berger impression. Ron Berger he was one of the five partners of a 700 person agency in New York. And they did like Dos Equis, Most Interesting Man in the World. Ron wrote Subway, Eat Fresh. Like, so when you're 22, this is the guy you're afraid of, but also the universe brought us back together. Like, I'm so glad he's in my life. And he's like, Ryan, he's like, you're not in advertising, you're in creative business. And like, that stuck with me. Like, I wish more business people knew what creativity could do for the bottom line. And I wish more creatives didn't see themselves as starving artists, that they really do have an impact on business.
Yeah. I literally just said the other day that I didn't realize until I was diagnosed with cancer that I was a creative. Like, I went to business school, I went to school for entrepreneurship, I worked in financial services. Like, I always felt like I was the business side, and I always was very creative growing up. And of course, entrepreneurship and all that is very creative, but I wouldn't be like, I'm not a creative. My husband's a creative. My husband's a drummer, he's a musician and a writer. And like, it was very recent that kind of came to light for me after so much of like collaborations and other things. And it like kind of made my brain like explode in a really great way. But I'm like, oh my god, now that I'm like giving myself permission to be a creative also, like, it's expanding so much how I look at business. Like, I don't know what it takes. Don't let cancer be the thing to make you realize it. But it was because it was after that diagnosis that I started, being asked to be on podcasts and some other discussions where I was talking with more creative people. And I would say, well, I'm not a creative, I'm more the business side. And they'd be like, are you serious? And so no one called me out on that before.
Well, there's two parts. There's two very interesting insights on this. I mean, one, I'm very curious. If you don't mind, can I do the thing? I guess when your company is called Courageous, you can get away asking things that others won't. And I promise you, there's a reason I'm asking this question. So, around how old were you when you had this conversation with yourself and Double Rainbows? Kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm a creative. How old were you?
Uh, 36. I'm 38
Okay, so
now. Yeah.
the reason, and I'll get to the second one in a minute. So the reason I asked, um, when I was writing Return on Courage, the universe decided the very first in-person interview I was going to have was with a woman named Loretta Hidalgo, who's a founding astronaut at Virgin Galactic. And it's like close enough that I could drive to, right? So at this point, I haven't gone on the journey. I have a lot to learn. I have lots of fears. One of them is like, don't ask the astronaut a stupid question, right? Like all the things. And before Trey's even at the table, she said, so what makes you qualified to write a book about courage? And you're like, touche astronaut, like I've been writing pitchy one-liners on Twitter for a living. That's pretty courageous. And she's like, no, 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 no. Like, she's like, I didn't tell you to write this book. Like, you got to figure out part of your mission. And that's the word she used. part of your mission is to figure out why you. And she proceeds to tell me it takes you 40 years to figure out who you are and the next 40 to be that person. And so that I'm like writing the book. I'm like 38 when I started. Like, I'm like, oh no, like, wait a minute. This is no. Like, what this book is taking on an entirely different trajectory than what I thought. And I do think, as you know, Alyssa, like books are rite of passage. Like I wrote the book because I needed the book. Like that's the number one thing. I learned more about myself from writing this than anything. Now, the other thing that's interesting is I have a new book coming out in October about self talk. It's called Headamentals, and the whole idea is like the only way we can actually move ahead is to understand our heads, right? And it's like so headamentals, fundamentals for your head. And I love and I wonder what you were saying to yourself. What was the self talk that you had? That's like I'm not a creative. You're not a creative. You're the business side. That's why you went to business school. Like I'd be so curious to hear, like how much did your self talk play in that, and then when did you give yourself permission to go, oh my gosh, this is this is awesome. I'm both, which you are.
Thanks. It's funny because the first podcast I was on, it was like when I first got diagnosed and like in my initial chemo, so I'm bald and all this. And it was a friend, Lauren LaGrasso, has a podcast called Unleash Your Inner Creative. And, it's on, I didn't really think much of the name of that. I just, talked about my story. And then, you know, when I was 36, like a couple of years ago, we were on a trip together and we were talking about in general, like her podcast. And I said, thank you so much again for having me on. That was the first time I got to like do something like that. And it's so cool you asked me, even though I'm not a creative. And it was like, that's when she
Oh,
like stopped the,
Oh wow.
and I mean that was very genuine of me that like I really just because of how we categorize it in the space where I am, being in LA, my husband's a musician, so many of our friends are, what you think of a stereotypical creative. And I do think what you said with realizing that you can be both, which like in turn throughout the 16 years I've been with my husband, I've definitely made him more business minded too. It's like we both kind of gravitate each other to be balanced in both. And it's yeah, that probably nailed it on the head what you said.
like, wait a minute, you mean I'm full brained? I'm left brained and right brained? Yeah, okay, that's a not a bad place to be, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to be able to be the business as well as the creative side. Yeah, I think the other thing too, Ryan, as you're talking about, you're talking to brands, especially from like the beginning of the conveyor belt, again, the internal culture and the alignment. When you hear the concept of radical candor, is that just like a throwaway as like a tactic versus actually really truly aligning the internal culture and making sure leadership and the front lines are aligned with
Yeah.
what they're doing?
I don't know how because it's a like that lexicon is a right. It's a branded term now, even if it's just for the ears. And you're kind of stumbling into my love language, which is language, right? I love language, and I love looking at words and try. It's like imagine words are on a stock market, and like, are they down? Are they up? It's like, oh, everyone's using that word. It's down. Like the word leadership. I think it's like clearly down. We need leadership, but like the amount of times I've seen leadership get misconstrued as I'm the leader, you're the follower, or like a leader that's a cheerleader. They're not really being honest. They're rah-rahing, but like everyone kind of knows. Well, where's the plan? Like I don't need a cheerleader. I need a plan. And so I love looking at words like that. So when you say radical candor, I think that's a truth to like how we try to go about our day. I think we have an obligation to honor the word behind me, right? Like if we're going to be courageous, then and I learned this from my podcast. Like we're now over 220 guests on our podcast, and the one thing I've learned from many leaders is I don't think they see themselves as courageous. I think they see themselves as real. I just see that they're like, I'm just trying to keep it real. I'm trying to tell the truth. And so like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna keep it real. I'm gonna like my obligation is to like keep it real and tell you what we're seeing. We could do it with tact. We can be delicate. Um, I have a whole new love for tough love. I think tough, you're a jerk, but tough love is like sometimes a team or a company or a leader needs to hear like the truth, and you've got to figure out the right way to do it where people can continue to feel that there's hope inside an organization. It's a delicate dance. I'll tell you an under-indexed word. I think, well, another over-indexed word is culture. Like culture, 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 culture. It's like the under-indexed word that I see is team. And somewhere along the way, we seem to have leaped over this word. We talk about leaders, we talk about culture, and it's like smack in the middle of it is the team. It's like, how courageous is this team? Has this team decided what their identity is? I don't think remote work is helping us here because we're all living in square boxes in 30-minute increments, and everyone's overwhelmed and everyone's trying to be productive. And there's not enough time for the team to come together and get aligned on like, well, how do we want to show up? And sometimes that is on the leader, and some it's like, hold on, we need a timeout here and we need to all come together. So like a lot of our work right now, I feel like, is helping leaders build stronger, more clear and courageous teams where we're locking arms and holding hands. And it's like, okay, here's where we want to go. Let's be honest about where we are today, and how are we going to get there to tomorrow? What's that going to take? And it's like, you would think it was so basic of an idea. I didn't say this. I don't remember what book had quoted this, but someone was like looking at sports shock, and they're like, in sports, teams train 95% of the time to play 5% of the time. And in business, it's the opposite. Your orientation is like 24 hours, and they give you like a jersey. You're like, I don't even know which basket I'm shooting at, right? And it's like you it's the opposite. You're playing, the game has started, the whistle has blown.
Yes.
Nobody has told you which way you're running. So I think we're trying to like be like, it's almost like try to no brainer this with leaders. Like, we got to slow down a little bit. If you want to go faster later, let's make sure we're at
We've
least on
been
the same
running the
page as a
wrong
team.
way for years.
And if you did an anonymous survey of every company, it'd be really scary to see what percent would be like, that's us.
That is, yeah, that's like you're hitting on so many like key points. Like people are overwhelmed, they're remote, they're disconnected. They're talking to people through a box, not in person. But the thing is that not everyone has a Ryan and a courageous to pull themselves out from being so close into the business. So, what are some of those first questions that those teams need to ask themselves to like come to that realization, like, holy shit, something's broken here, and I don't think we're able to fix it. We need a Ryan.
I don't know if I have a great answer, but if you come up with one, I'll take it.
Yeah.
It'd be great for our marketing. But
Right.
I think anytime there's that hard, like you have that like little voice in your soul or your head that you're like, this seems messed up. I do. It's funny. In a lot of my keynotes, I have this one slide I call it like my after school special slide. It's like my bubblegum Hallmark slide. Like,
Yeah.
but it, and I usually end with it. And it's like, how courageous becomes a contagious trait is it actually does start with you. Like, there's one person having the courage. Now, the way it usually shows up is like, is this messed up? This feels messed up. Hey, person I trust, do you have a minute? And then in the old days, they'd come into your office and you close the door, right? And you're like, I think this is messed up. Is this messed up? Now it's probably a square or it's a text. Like the
Yes.
meeting is in a text box or a Slack chain, but it's like, it transfers from a you to a two. Hey, is this messed up? Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was messed up. Hey, this still seems messed up, right? That's messed up. Okay. Then it goes from you to two to few. And your obligation is like, hey, do you think this is messed up? And then suddenly it goes from you to two to few to crew. And then you got like that sort of, all right, we think this needs to be addressed. And by the way, it's also not just on fear based stuff. It could also be like, I think this is awesome. This is cool. right? Do you think this is cool? Yes. We need to do more of this. Let's reward people for this. Few to two, two to few, few to crew. And if and then it becomes the slew. And if you look at the definition of a slew, the definition of a slew is an uncontrollable movement. So something as controllable as one person having the courage to go no or yes or whatever, and like bringing the second person in and just transferring that knowledge to that person, like, hey, I think we messed this thing up, or actually, that's that was amazing what happened in that room. We need to reward that person, and in fact, like every month, let's give a monthly gift card for that behavior. One of my favorite engagements has been with the Houston Texans. Doug Bosick is he was a CMO. I think he's now CMO and running revenue for them. Um, Doug and I, and this was Doug's before, but I got a chance to keynote and see it happen before my eyes. One of the things they created was they called it the CDS Award, Cool Dope Shit Award, the CDS. And if you did a CDS, right? Well, guess what? Guess what? Now they're creating the desired behavior that they want. Started as a Doug thing, something that you, then it went to two, then it went to a few, and now it's like slew. Like so much bigger than Doug, and everyone's trying to win one of these things. And so I think that's if I'm not there, you don't need a me. You need a you. You need you to have the courage to go find that first person that you trust and go, this is cool. Let's operationalize this. This is messed up. Let's nip this in the butt. Could take a while, but let's be consistent on going after it. The other lazy answer, and this sounds like shameless self-promotional stuff, but it's so much easier to gift knowledge. So like the amount of times I'm like, if you have someone you work with that you feel like isn't being brave, give them a copy of Return on Courage. Just like write a note in the book and say, thought of you, saw this book, read this book, loved it. I thought you'd love it. Take it for a whirl. Like who doesn't like to get knowledge? Gift knowledge away. They're gonna pick up what you're putting down. Okay, why did you give me this book? Right? Like we could be more of this. Like it's an easy diffuser to the conversation.
Right. Yeah, it could be an easier diffuser to the conversation. It's an outside voice. You're based in experience and knowledge. I think but at the same time, going back to the overwhelmingness, we're disconnected. I think we've gotten to, like, I'm speaking for myself, sometimes get into the routine, like just just going through the flow and just checking the box instead of like what you're saying, which is the critical thinking aspect of like pulling myself out and saying, hey Alyssa, hey Ryan, this doesn't really jive. Like, what do you think? And then the opposite end is like, this, I saw this is really cool, like, what do you think? Like, just like, again, a yes, no, this is cool, it's cool, and then building on it, building upon that. So I think it's like, again, pulling ourselves out from just being so close into what we're working on, I think, and giving it some fresh air and some fresh perspective, I think is huge. I think it's massive. And what you're talking about for the Houston Texans, the Cool Dope Shit Award. So I had Nicole Portwood, who I met through Jeff, and when at her jobs and talk about culture and teams, she set up these what if type scenarios with her teams, like, and she encouraged everybody, like, what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And it's like getting everyone involved into thinking like, that's really cool. It's like a tissue session. Like, you're putting your ideas on a whiteboard, and then you're voting on it. You're ranking that, and like, okay, that's possible. How this is like medium range, and here's some of the resources and timing that's needed, and here is like stars align. This is what we can do. So I think it can start from a CMO, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but it also can start anywhere, because you talk about leaders and followers. Like, anyone can be a leader.
This is why, again, I'm back to the word willing, right? Like, is there a willingness? Right. By the way, that's super hard if you're 25 to be willing enough to say,
Yeah.
right, to a CMO or a VP or some, hey, this feels off. Why are we doing it this way? And then that person's got to make a decision. Like, do they have the courage to, you know what, you're right. Like, let's go take this together. I'll take it. Let's see where it goes. Right. And it's like, we don't know everything. We just don't know what everyone's dealing with. But like, it's always, almost always for the greater good of the team, right? It's greater good of the work. And sometimes we forget that part.
Yeah, we forget that part. And it's funny, like, I was talking to a guest that you also had on your show, Jason Schulweiss at the Female Quotient.
Oh yeah. I did.
And I love Jason because he's like, I'm in the C-suite, but I don't know everything. And when I hire someone new, I ask them, I'm like, give me recommendations, give me feedback. Like you're fresh blood, you're fresh perspective. Like if there's something that we could be doing differently, tell us. Like and again, that's the willingness, right? That's the encouragement. From what it sounds like, that's not always the case. How do we
Yeah.
elicit?
But it's also normal. Like, guess what? People are tired, right? People have kids at home.
Yeah.
People are dealing with shit. People sat in traffic and are angry. People's internet went down. Like it's the same thing with story. It's like, I'm sorry, but you never get 100% of somebody's. Hey, you're listening to this right now, and you're probably doing two other things. Maybe you're driving your car and you're just pissed off at someone that honked at you, or you're in the gym, or like we're all shitty multitaskers is my point. So like you never get 100% of somebody's attention. And in some of these cases, you kind of need to figure out a way to be like, this is that important that we get right, that we get this part right. Everyone's gonna be ready to roll, and everyone's ready to roll. Nobody wants to leave, and everybody feels like they can speak freely. Then let's have those hard conversations and see how it changes the trajectory of this career. So of this company.
Mhm.
It's a really, as you can tell, I get passionate about this stuff. It's a really fun arena to play in, and it's rooted in like, can we really make a difference and help?
Yeah, how we can make a difference, how we can help. You were going to say
Well, I
something.
was just say the willingness part really resonates because it's like it's a lot of effort to have courage, right? I mean, and like especially
I'm exhausted.
yeah, I mean you're probably just so tired. But also like if you're not that C-level executive or it's not your business, then like being, that employee that is just focused on like what they have to do after work and all that, like do you want to bring up that something maybe should change? Like are you then going to have more work because of that? Like how do you kind of make it so that the team feels like invested in wanting to open up those holes?
Yeah, there's again, we're kind of a nice spot because it's like, let's play both sides of this out, right? The UN has showed up again to play both sides of this. So on one side, the leadership sometimes, the amount of times I've said, well, there's no politics at the top. Like when you're at the top, you forget that politics are happening below you. People are afraid. You don't just show up as Eric or Alyssa or Ryan. You show up as, that's my boss's boss.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there is a level of tension and fear that you've forgotten because you're in this. You're like, I don't understand. Like, what's the holdup on this project, right? But which is like a false alarm in someone's brain when you dump a division and then go ask somebody, where are we on the project? You're just trying to do your job and help. So one, I think you forget. You forget the tension that you probably bring down, and two, you also probably forgot those few moments that you were courageous, which is how you got into the seat in the first place, right? You were courageous, and if you picked a couple spots, and I think this is the other side. The way that I would, if I'm, again, let's be realistic too. If someone's 40 minutes in on this conversation, you're clearly invested in this talk. There's something about what we're talking about that's landing. Maybe you have an opportunity to like, you want to be willing and you want to be brave. But if you're still listening, that means that you probably want to be courageous and look at courage like a currency. Like you can't use your money everywhere. Like you will be broke. You gotta pick a few, you'll be exhausted, right? You've got to pick your courage currency spots. You'll be emotionally broke if you try to like actually use courage on every project. You'll exhaust yourself, you'll exhaust everyone around you. So, where can you pick your spots? What are the 2 to 3 spots where like that's a moment this year where I'm gonna lean in. Here's why I feel this way. I'm gonna use my currency. I'm just use my courage currency on this project and we're gonna go for it. That's an experiment. We don't know how it's gonna turn out. But again, if you're still listening here, you probably want to take a cut, especially if you're career driven. So that's how I would go about it. And then remember, those same people that you're scared of, they've got stories of how they were probably courageous. They may have forgotten, right? Maybe they're stressed for different reasons. And your job is to like humanize them to yourself. And then hopefully they'll show themselves to you as you're like going down your path, going for it. Hopefully that's somewhat useful.
Very, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, scaling a nonprofit, right? Especially being the first in the field of being
Mhm.
a gift registry for cancer patients, survivors, and supporters. Imagine, like, a lot of this is uncharted territory
Yeah,
that you have
definitely.
to uncover, and you have to iterate. Like, to Ryan, what Ryan's saying is like, do I use my courage currency on this thing? Especially again, if it hasn't been done before. Like, that's the tough part. Is like, I don't know what the outcome's going to be if we execute this thing, but we need to go, like, in your gut. Maybe it's intuition, right? Maybe it's like in my gut. We need to do it because of what the outcome could be.
Yeah, like when we recently revamped part of our website, a few years in, and I knew for a while that it was like the right thing to do because things had evolved with capabilities and other platforms and all that, and what we were doing wasn't sustainable because of how expensive it was to do updates. But like it meant having to kind of trash what we had spent a big part of our initial fundraising on to do something new, which was way lower cost. But you're like, but I worked so hard to bring in every dollar that we did to create that WordPress site. Making like really just deciding to make that change is like evolving and changing everything. But it's still hard sometimes, like even when you know it's the right thing to be courageous, because it's like it's hard to get out of our own ways sometimes too. And I don't know if ego is the right word for that, but like definitely like I feel, and maybe this also hits harder like in a life of living, with cancer and things like that, is like the idea that I might have wasted time or donors' money or
Right.
things like that is like
Totally.
it's shattering. Like it's so different than if it was just a startup or something else.
Yeah, I think your last point is like it's almost. I'm sure people that invest in you and know you wouldn't waste time, even though you might have to remind them of that. But Eric, I don't know if you read I have a weekly dose of courage that goes out every Thursday as an email, and it's sort of eerie that the one that went out this week was called the Mastery Mystery, and we're like, mastery seems to be a thing we talk. It's another sports word, stock market word. It's a thing we talk about mastery, and we know that sounds like a desirable thing we all would like to achieve. And Malcolm Gladwell told us we need 10,000 hours in Outliers to do it, right? And then I'm like, I mean, it feels like the wrong conversation. Like I've been studying courage for a decade now. I'm not focused at all about mastery. Like I'm focused on constantly examining and re-examining the concept of courage and how it shows up to deliver what the truth is in that moment, because time is moving even though we don't feel it. Therefore, shit's happening. What was relevant one day is not relevant the next. What your playbook was one day is not relevant the next. Okay, well, that's how we've always done it. That's a very easy line to poke holes at, right? We all do it. But it's unless it's your company. And then when it's your company, it's like, wait a minute, why are we changing the playbook? And so that's where I find it fascinating. On like, wow, mastery really isn't what I'm going for. I'm trying to stay a detective to just understand, has my hypothesis changed as time continues to move? And then every time I take a stage, every presentation is pretty much an iteration. It's not a revolution, or it's an evolution off of, did this land? Is this still true? I'm like, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm giving people value. You want to call that mastery if you're doing it over 10 years? Great. I don't think that's the right conversation. It's just staying in detective mode to make sure you're still delivering value. So I loved, Alyssa, like your take on the pain is, I know this is the right move. I now have to go back and tell all these people that gave us money that we're changing. I don't want to upset them or frustrate them. It's exhausting to have that conversation, but we know it's the right move. You still had to do it. It still was a courageous move, even though you know it was the right one. And in your heart, that's where we're going, right? Not always the case where the leader has, like knows, like I'm never going to waste time. Like they might be taking money. That's a really hard conversation, especially when millions and millions of dollars is at stake. But look, this is what our friend Jeff Ragavan's so good at, right? Like the amount of times Jeff is like, I have to continue to follow the opportunity, and what was true today, and that isn't true anymore. And like, let's go. We got to pivot. That's that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Bounty Uncharted, his TV show, like it's it started off as like he went out, he's going out fishing and then bringing back what he and his buddies catch, and they grill at home. But I think it's again it's evolving into something more than that. It's more of like that lifestyle show of him, of course, him being on the high seas and some of his friends like Katie. But yeah, no, he absolutely like he's never deterred, right? Like there's like a block or a challenge, like he figures out a way to pivot and to see it through, see where the puck is going, which I think is which is amazing. And speaking of pivoting, again, like what Alyssa was saying, what you were saying, like is this the right move? And and I think it also goes back to Malcolm Gladwell, the outliers. Like you have to spend, for mastery, right? Like, and I think sometimes people confuse mastery with pivoting. Like you have to be a master at your field in order to know when to pivot. Gladwell says 10,000 hours. And I think you're right. It's a fallacy. Like this 10,000, like why are you trying to quantify mastery or expertise based on just some arbitrary, 10,000? Like, and I understand he did his research. He spoke to a lot of people who are quote unquote experts in their field, but is 10,000 hours really the bar? But going back to pivoting, right? It's like, Mike and Cass, for example, Buddy Media started off as selling Facebook apps. And they're like, okay, this is the worst idea. So let's create a software as a solution platform to allow brands like Procter and Gamble to scale their early Facebook presence. So like from based on your experience, like what is that like that guide stick of like, okay, this may not be working, so we need to change things.
I can only go off our own journey. Like we, knock on wood, like I'm very grateful to report. Like I think when I can only go off. Courageous is the only business I've been in on my side where I'm like, wow, that's interesting. The applications are plenty. Right? It's like you go into it being like, hey, is someone going to hire me as a keynote? I wrote a book. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, these conversations, like everyone knows we should have them and no one's having them. What's going on here? Like, so the way we've looked at it is, and I don't think this is the case, like in the Mike and Cass or Jeff examples, it's been less pivoting and more widening the aperture on almost like how can you apply courage depending on the right situation. When is it like, hey, we actually have sliced bread and we need a courageous idea that can break through, and there's still a ton of joy when we get to do that type of work. Other companies, it's like I said, we're not there yet, right? Some other companies is like this, we're not making those decisions. We're not making those pivots. We're not making those leaps. We have one client right now that we're working with, like, and this is sort of a bummer because like I can't mention the client and I can't talk about what we're doing. But what I can say is like, great show, Ryan, great job. But there's a potential for them to like go bigger than they're going. And I think maybe the best way to sum this up is if you don't have trust of the leadership, you will always be in a transactional relationship. And that means you are responsible for this, do that. And I think what we're trying to do is to be that willing, flexible partner that goes, have you considered this? Have you thought about this? Here's where else your brand can go. Here's where our team can go. We're never going to be a Deloitte or like a McKinsey. I've definitely said a lot of consultancies make you think. We're really good at making you feel and do. And that is the arena that we want to play in. So long-winded, but how I feel about pivots and where we might go and how we can help our clients.
Is just expanding the aperture of how to deliver value within the confines of not the confines within the context of courageous and clarity.
And I'll say last thing, like the higher up people get, it seems the more lonely they seem to be. Like right, like the less people they seem to trust, especially on the outside. And so that's the other thing that I really like about doing shows like this. Like this is me on Fridays, me on Sundays, me on if I'm in your boardroom. I mean, sometimes they don't like, the t-shirt. Sometimes I'm not wearing there's been days where I've put a suit on. I'm like, oh, this is not me. That's not me. If you need a suit version of me, probably should not hire us. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, got it. No, this is excellent, Ryan, and we really do appreciate your time. For the folks who want to follow Courageous, follow you, follow the podcast, where can they find you?
First of all, thanks, guys. That was a fast 50. Awesome convo. I think we all got this. Let's call it. We all got this, right? And I'm glad to be part of the team. Uh, Best place to get me, probably ryanberman.com. That gets you to everything else. Returnoncourage.com. If you want the book, you can grab that at Amazon. The Courageous Podcast is available. It's here. Spotify, Apple. It's been a really, really fun ride. And Tash, I'm glad that we got introduced. You're my people, and excited to see what we do together in the future.
No, I very much appreciate it. I appreciate your time and the wisdom that you dispensed, not just in this conversation, but our email conversations, our previous conversations, and just being so willing to share your knowledge and experience with us, with Alyssa and I, and of course the podcast audience. So I really do appreciate it. Ryan, again, thank you. Alyssa, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Yes, and I love the fact that both of you are going to be in Detroit in September.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
Also, slightly sad that you're 2 hours north of me, but we're like, I'll see you in 3 months.
No, I think
15 states away.
That for sure.
That's true.
I mean, now I've never thought about the word courageous this much, so it's gonna haunt me, and we're gonna need follow-ups for sure.
Well, you know where to find me now. Deal?
Yes, deal. Likewise.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for bringing all the amazing people together.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.